Hello, everybody. My name's Milan Starcic. Welcome to Freedom Rising, a podcast dedicated to empowering individuals on the journey to personal growth, lasting serenity, and freedom from addiction. Tune in and join the movement. Your journey to freedom starts here. We neither represent, promote, or demote any 12-step program or organization. We are merely souls on the path of recovery with the desire to expand our lives and experiences and share them with you. Hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome to the 43rd Recovery Freedom Rising podcast. I'm Milan Starcic with co-host Bryant W. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Bryant?
Sure. Thanks for having me. Good to see you, my friend.
So good to see
I
you.
am a 39-year-old, born and raised in Canada, originally from Toronto, Ontario. I come from a family with two sisters, a younger and older sister. I am the middle brother, and I come from a family that, unfortunately, my parents decided not to spend their life together when I was roughly 4 or 5 years old. So I had that experience as a young man, and so I've had an interesting experience, spending time with different parents and having kind of different ecosystems and adapting through that and all those different kind of like perks but challenges. I always looked at myself as a sort of fairly well-rounded person through my youth and then through my teenage years. Pretty athletic, kind of outgoing. I like to make a lot of jokes. I got in some trouble at school. I like to see what else could be stirred up kind of thing, but usually well-intended, but ended up getting in trouble a lot. And by my mid-teens, some of the family stuff and sort of my own personal insecurities were starting to bloom. I kind of realized that I was already sort of very self-conscious, but I didn't understand that yet. I just knew that it was there. I did the kind of transition with most of my friends, which was go to high school to university. I started taking school just seriously enough near the end there to achieve that type of goal. But soon after having moved away from home, I lived in Halifax. I was 17 when I first moved into my first apartment, and I had a roommate. I had a little bit of money and no responsibility, and very quickly realized I was not well prepared for that type of scenario. And I won't go too much further past that, but essentially at that age, right around 18, 19, it became quite clear that I was well set up for what became an incredibly challenging part of my life, which was my relationship with alcohol. And sort of self-discovery from that moment on became like almost a decade-long pursuit of chronic failure, exhaustion. And I found my way in my late 20s, having kind of achieved a few things, but not ever coming close to the kind of person I was really expecting myself to be at that time. And I'm here a decade later after, taking some really positive steps in my life, having a lot of blessings, realizing that there's a ton of people out there that are willing to help people, and achieved a nice chunk of life without the dependence of alcohol. And since then, I lived in British Columbia for 10 years. I was a commercial diver. I did underwater construction. I ended up with a head injury from that, which ended my career. And in the last few years, I've gotten into personal development, life coaching, and addiction recovery as my new focus and occupation as well.
And just for everybody listening then, so how much clean time do you have?
I'm currently at 9 years, somewhere in between 9 and 10 years.
Nice. Well, that's pretty inspiring for someone who's 39, that you managed to get a hold of it by the time you're 30. And so I asked this question of everybody who comes on the show, because I think it's important for people to see that it's a really incremental or momentous thing, like that there's so much variety in this. Is what was the pivotal moment when the program sparked a recovery fire in your heart? Like where it went from like, oh, I gotta go to this meeting to holy shit, this can work for me. And I see joy and serenity in my life.
Okay. It's a really important and that's an amazing question. And I could imagine that it's kind of challenging to pinpoint that, but I actually do have an answer. And that was, by the time I went, I was using a program. I was doing what I was told. I had a mentor. I was sort of wholeheartedly open to change, but still living out of my old sort of reluctance, a bit of maybe I'll do half this and half that, or maybe I'll go this day but not that day. I was giving it my all, but not, there's a difference, right? And so what happened was, around 3 months of doing this exploration, I was sort of a little abrasive to some of the suggestions that my mentor had been giving me. I really cared about the guy. I was still living out of that place where I felt like I needed to like impress him, or like, he was like the person I was looking up to. So, and he had all these recommendations, and there was a handful of things where I was like, whoa, like this is getting a little too much. I don't think I'm willing to do that. And I thought that he was a little tough on me, and I was kind of like, I don't know if I like this. And we had a phone call one day. I left my job site and we had a chat, and I said, I don't like the way you're talking to me. And he said, you need some more humility. And he said it very sternly, but he said it with love. And I just, all of a sudden, it's hard to talk about because it was like so impactful, but this dude basically put me in my place, but in a loving way. And he's just said, like, I know that you can do this, and you got to trust me and stop pushing back. And that day, I realized that this gentleman that I had never met in my life just a few months before, who had a solution that I needed, had met me for hours on a weekly basis. I was sort of like giving him a bit of grief, and he sort of put me in my place. And from that moment on, I surrendered in a way that I thought that I had already, but it truly was like it was like the leveling up or leveling down, like the humility that I did need in order to, I think, travel past what could have been maybe a less smooth transition into this sort of life, So that was it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was doing a podcast last night with some people, and part of it was about reservations. And one of the co-hosts, he had a really interesting point. He said, I can only address the reservations I know, and some of them are so deeply embedded, they're hidden from my own eyes.
Yeah.
And so, to me, while you were saying that, it brought back what Mike had said, and I realized that if this man was your sponsor, which I'm assuming he was, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct.
So, like that your sponsor was, first of all, had enough integrity and enough honesty to come to you, even when he knew it could sever your relationship, to show
Good
you
point.
something that you weren't seeing in yourself, and,
Yeah. Good
and,
point.
and it really, it brings to light to me the importance of community inside this program, because
Oh,
that necessity for community, because like we can't always calibrate ourselves
very well
accurately,
said. Yeah.
you know
Very well said.
and so, okay, so today's topic is finding my personal serenity inside the program.
Yes.
Is can you tell me just like what that means to you, just to hear it, and
Right.
and just maybe speak on that for a minute, and then I will, and then
Sure.
we'll start the questions.
Great. Yeah. So we'll elaborate throughout the question part. But
Mm,
it's a beautiful question. It's an amazing topic, because I think that the difference between, what they call a life of unmanageability and a life of manageability, and if you're blessed enough to actually describe your life as serene, then um, I think that kind of ties into what I just briefly touched on, which is that level of self-acceptance, as well as acceptance of generally the things in life that I know for myself. I used to resist so many things, I don't like the way that person said that. Why don't they pay me more? you know, you could go on and on and on. And next thing you know, you're like a fuzzy TV screen, just like buzzing and wondering why you're not content. And for an alcoholic, that's a really scary place to live, because prior to finding all the different things that we're learning now, my solution was to drink. And because I'm an alcoholic, if I drink, I can't control that, which means that I add to an already dysfunctional state of mind and body a brand new day full of chaos. And I do that until my life presents itself as unmanageable, right? So Serenity for me is it's a complete change of perspective on myself, the people around me, what life's all about. It ties into my motives now have changed completely. The way I perceive other people. And more than anything, it's just having like a new relationship with life itself, which I think starts with the relationship with yourself. And so when I started treating myself better, I had a higher expectation of how I expected to be treated. And if I'm blessed enough to be treated well, I call that gratitude. And if I'm not, I have to surrender and accept that that's part of life, you know? So it's all perspective for me.
Well put, brother. You know,
Yeah.
like for myself, you know, my personal serenity inside the program. First of all, I don't know if I had serenity outside of the program. Like
Yeah.
I constantly describe it like I was 0 or 11. Like I
Great.
was either out crashed or I was
Yeah.
like 11 shooting for 14 with substances.
Yeah.
And and you know, like now I call like serenity my 6 or 7.
Nice.
And you know, and I really am finding joy and happiness in that flux, in that middle zone,
Nice.
you know. And but you know, even now it continues to come as glimmers, I call them.
I
You
get
know,
it.
it's not it's you know, sure, there can be some pretty full days of something like that, but it's a flux because I'm still, you know, a student of acceptance and will be my whole life, right? And
Exactly.
for myself, you know, it's like this morning I was having a really frustrated point with this whole electronic setup, but then I
Yeah.
had a success and I was like, oh my God, I'm like, okay, I'm like, this is good enough. And you know, that's
Well
like
said.
you know, like there was a song I wrote this summer, and it was like I had a week. I had a week where I was like, if the world groundhog dayed me on this week, life would
Yeah.
be good enough forever. And I don't
Nice.
know if I could have said that very often in my life. And you
I believe
know,
you. Yeah.
so it's like, when is good enough? You know,
Very well
when
said.
can we
Yeah.
call it love? You know, and so for me, it's my perpetual quest. You know, my sponsor says to me, he's like, you know, you want to have these glimmers of serenity. He's like, but you
Yeah.
also want to have that desire for more. It's like
Agreed.
being a seeker keeps us vigilant and keeps us from being complacent inside our lives, right? And
Nice.
that's like, so it's like, it's good to be happy and hungry almost simultaneously.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
understand exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I can
know you
agree
do
with that.
because you and I have talked so deep sometimes, and this is why I'm really enjoying having you here. I'm really grateful
Me
that
too.
you were okay to coming on, and you know, I could see us doing a series together. You know, like it would
That'd
be
be
really
rad. Yeah.
great. You know, so okay, I'm going to start with the first question.
Please. Yeah.
You'll answer, I'll answer, and then you can ask a question. So, the serenity to accept things we cannot change often comes after having had the courage to change the things we could. It takes courage and humility to open new doors and close old ones. How has
Wow.
courage factored into the personal serenity you've developed using the program of the steps?
That's a beautiful question. I really like how you propose the having taken a step to then have the courage to then accept the things you can't, because it's funny because it is really challenging to take the step for yourself, but to allow other people to find their own way when you have thoughts about how they could potentially change is even more challenging, I think. So,
Entirely.
um, Yeah. So I think there's a combination of things. It's when I work with people or when I had my, early experiences, I realized this is where the higher power or like the faith and kind of like a new kind of renewed belief in just sort of the overall intelligence of life itself. You start to realize how connected things are, how they say coincidences, and then other people say there's no coincidences because there's actually a cause and effect that it seems out of place, but it's actually, I don't know. I guess I'll just answer the question. Basically,
No,
every
no.
step I
I,
took.
honestly, I love philosophical wandering. So I want you to know that through this episode, we don't have to
Yeah.
cut things short. Okay,
Okay.
just right off the bat, keep rolling.
I appreciate that. So what happened was every single day I lived, because you kind of have to hunker down at the beginning, I mean, and at different parts of things that come up and stir you up, even after some chunks of time that if things have been going well. I just started noticing, I was like, okay, so this person put me in touch with this person. And I learned this and now I'm doing that and I've stopped doing that and I don't miss that. And how come I don't want to call that person? And I just started like feeling better about being alive. And I guess the most fundamental thing is that seed of hope, you know and we're really cool about how we honor things. Like we always emphasize the present moment, we always emphasize the day. But it is kind of neat that like it's hard not to say, oh my gosh, like I haven't had a drink in like 30 days, and so there are little brief moments of what you might call a mini celebration, but it's more of an uplift, sort of a little lighthouse moment to reflect back on like the little trip you've been on. And I think that those little incremental landmarks kind of reassure you that you're on the right track. So it was a combination of sort of like, this can't just be happening. Like, I don't know. I just felt like I was being looked after. I that first year was so amazing. Like the amount of things that shifted and changed. I felt peaceful. I felt like I was gaining my respect back. Just all these little things. So the courage came from those experiences. And then I think, again, too, if you're blessed enough to have done it this way, the surrender comes with its own acceptance. Because if I'm now taking a look at, if I'm doing a list of character defects, if I'm looking at my part in things, whoa. So for the first time ever, I'm like, I have no place to start picking away at what other people are doing, because I am being extremely honest about, my shortcomings. And so I think there's ebbs and flows, waves kind of in and out with that that fact. And in that first chunk of time, the courage and like the happenings and the things that I started trying to hope. And then on top of that, I was in such a state of surrender and sort of like admittance of my own limitations that it really made it a lot easier to stay out of other people's business. And it felt good. It felt so good to stay out of other people's business.
Absolutely.
So that's
Yeah,
what came to mind.
like I did an episode on courage a few weeks ago with a friend, and one of the things that we kind of ended up realizing inside the podcast was, for me, probably, one of the biggest moments of courage was that admission of addiction and that I
Yeah.
was powerless. Like,
Yeah.
like for me, I knew inside my head I was an addict for at least like solidly 2 years, but I knew if I said it out loud, there would be no
Yes.
returning to not saying it with me or my wife or my family or my life. Like you can't unaddict yourself. You just can't.
Correct.
Like
I agree.
this program is proof of that. And, and my 17 years of white knuckling it here and there proved to
Sure.
me that, that was the case. And then, really the act of surrender is a massive act of courage because you're being brave enough to let go.
Agreed.
It's not so brave just to hold on to control. That's not brave. That's just like a knee-jerk reaction. Like, I
It's
would say that's
probably
almost
fear.
like, yeah, but yeah, exactly. And then to have the courage to do that moral inventory that makes you fear less. They call it a
Yeah,
fear moral inventory, but I call it the moral inventory that makes you fear less. You
that's
know,
awesome.
Uh, and like the humility and courage required to actually honestly see your part in stuff. That is
Yeah,
gigantic. Like,
it's
for
amazing.
me, it was like, oh man, I was like, okay, line up to the left of everybody who's going to apologize to me because I got like 30 resentments. Yeah, like, and then it was like I got into it and I'm like, oh, my part, my part, my part.
This is
Like,
great.
and then I'm like, okay, everybody to the right because that's my I gotta say sorry line. And and then even
It's a rough one to. Yeah,
and just even, the courage to say, hey, the way I was living was wrong.
well said.
You know,
Yeah,
like the way I was living was wrong, and now I got to make a change. You know,
yeah,
and it can mean losing all your friends. It can mean
exactly.
finding an entirely new group of friends. It can mean having to change your job.
Very much.
It can mean the destruction of relationships with so many people because, like, for myself, dude, don't send me the pictures of you partying on Halloween doing ecstasy anymore. Like, I don't care. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
like
no doubt.
weird things like that, like it just,
Yeah,
I just don't see it as, partying's not a spectator sport in my heart. And
yeah, I
then,
believe that.
and then the courage to go and say sorry to people for the things you've done with your amends, you know,
Yes.
and, like that's scary as
Um.
fuck with some situations.
Oh
Yeah.
man, it is. But the again though, you get this amazing. I mean, we all know
Oh,
that there's
mhm.
different outcomes for all these things, but isn't that so neat though? Like the two things that are probably, well, it's all terrifying, but it's all lovely. I mean, what I love about is the actual wisdom throughout the process, like
Mhm.
the relief that you get if you do have the courage to do that, and the amount of people that don't go and do it because of the fear. So they're basically giving you, like, they call them the promises. It's literally
Mhm.
talking about after the amends when we were halfway through. It's
Yeah,
oh, I just like it's
it's so true.
there's a
And
reason why these things exist.
I heard
Yeah.
this at a meeting the other day. Like, I'm down in Mexico, so I've been going to all the in-person meetings I can because where I live, they don't have them out in Oliver, really, right? And
Okay.
I heard if you don't write your fourth step, you'll drink your fifth.
That's
And I was
I
like,
honestly do believe
boom.
that.
Like,
It's
I'm just
interesting.
like, how many people go out by not completing their fourth step?
Well, if you've had the opportunity to try to work with people, it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a
I
lot.
I literally have had, like, I have had 5 sponsees now, right?
Beautiful.
And the completing of that, like, I must say, I might be a rude sponsor, but I'm like, don't fucking wait. I'm like, don't wait, don't mamby-pamby take 2 years on your steps. I'm like, that's not going to give you any relief.
Well, I
When
agree.
somebody calls me complaining about not getting relief, I'm like, okay, do some steps and call me back. I'm like,
Yeah.
spend a couple hours on your steps and call me back and let's talk. Let's see how it's going.
Yeah.
But, like, if you're not doing the steps, you're not living the program. And if you're not living the program, then don't complain the program doesn't work.
Well, I think that's very true. And also, yeah, so you said two things. So you talked about the result that can occur from not doing it. So it's funny because again, they're so every single part of it's all there for a reason. And so none of it's sort of like more than anything else. But I always felt like step four saved me. Like it saved my life.
Mm,
That's how I feel.
mm,
Um, Everything else is brilliant, but like doing that, I knew, and that was around the 6 month mark. I got into like the fourth and fifth, with my my sponsor, and I knew from that moment on I could no longer sort of, I guess there's different layers, they say, but there was sort of like a veil taken off, and it was like, okay, now I know the truth, and if I choose to like put that back on, then like there will be consequences. But I now know, and for some reason, I was relieved to know. Like
Me
it's not
too.
easy. Sorry.
No, no, I just said me too.
Yeah, like it's not easy to admit or to take responsibility, because I think there's a huge part of our developmental years, and get especially once you get that like sense of self kind of well ingrained, whether it's healthy or unhealthy, and we refer to it with the word ego constantly, but that like identity that we're giving off to the world and trying to get to reflect back to us, like depending on how ingrained that is, like that's a massive wallop. It's like,
Yeah.
oh shoot, I am not who I thought I was, like, oh Lord. But it's beautiful because something behind that is what's been crying in the background the whole time, which is probably you, whatever
Mhm.
that is.
There was somebody, this older couple that was on my podcast a couple days ago, and I really liked how they said it. They said, they call it a spiritual awakening because
Yeah,
everybody has this pure spirit sleeping inside them.
it's true.
And and
It's
and I
true.
really liked that. Like you don't you like the way it was put, I kind of think it was like you don't have a sick spirit. It's just like kind of neglected and in hiding.
I think
You
that's
know,
a
and
very good, yeah. I
I
just
thought
love
that
that
was
because,
amazing.
yeah, I hope I didn't interrupt. So
Oh,
I've always looked at it that way too. There's no tarnished spirit. It's that it's in the wrong order.
yeah,
It
exactly.
should
And
be at the front.
yes,
It should be
exactly.
leading you. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it hasn't been given a chance. It's been
And it
packed
makes
away
sense
because
though,
of
because
fear
nobody taught us that.
and yes,
I,
exactly.
yeah. Sorry, I think there was a little mini delay there. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I don't think that you did. It's all good, brother. So okay, now you could ask me a question. Let's hear Brian's question and then we'll keep on going.
Okay, so I have a couple, and so far, a lot of the stuff we've talked about, which happens a lot in these interactions, is stuff that I was thinking about. And so one of my questions is, how have your motives changed for yourself? Like, and it goes right into what we were just saying, because when you're living out of like that unhealthy place, usually that we talked about like instant gratification, I need to get this now, and like whatever it takes. So how have your motives changed as an individual as to like where you direct your energy? It's a bit of a broad question, but
So my motives have changed dramatically. My motives were to acquire, use more, acquire, use more at the end. Like that was out. And when I did my step 4 and 5 and 6, what I uncovered there was almost all of my resentments were based on creating a lack of acceptance about life in order to enable myself to continue using more. So like I would have intolerance and anger for you, and that would allow me to go, fuck you, Brian. I'm going out partying tonight. Or
yeah,
I would be like, oh shit, Brian, you're sick. I'm so sad you're sick. I'm going out using tonight.
yeah,
Oh
yeah,
shit,
yeah,
it's Brian's birthday. I gotta be so happy that I'll party for a week.
yeah,
And if you've got 52 friends well spaced out, you've got to party the rest of your life. Like,
yeah,
my motives were entirely run by substance seeking at the end.
yeah,
And so, and they were entirely selfish.
exactly. Yeah.
I would say that now, like I'm still fighting that. I'm still fighting that, but I'm
Oh yeah.
making a conscious effort to block out time and part of my life where I'm not being that, you know, where it's
Nice.
not just for that, like, and that's part of, why I've taken on so many sponsees is that service really does pull me out of myself. If I'm
It does.
if I'm working with you on your stuff for an hour, that's an hour I'm not thinking about myself.
Yes.
Bottom line. There's no pretending that. and that is a really, really important to me to sustain that, and
Yeah.
uh, like I'm really trying to look at my actions and the spiritual principles, and am I lining up?
Yes.
Like it was described to me by somebody in options when I was like confused. I was like, well, what's God's will? What's my will? I'm like, this is
Yeah.
just like, I'm like, I know what I want. I know what I want. So like, why doesn't
Yeah.
God just give us a template of what he wants? And the person said to me, just live by these principles and you'll know
Yeah.
you're inside it. Like if you're not breaking any one of these principles, odds are you're in the right place and doing the right thing. So,
Beautiful.
so that's kind of what my goal is to be towards.
Wonderful. That's
And
amazing. So just to reflect back to what you said. So
yeah.
isn't that so interesting? Because I think we're so um attached to thinking like what God or my will is to external goals, or like it is unbelievable. It's like, well, like what does God want me to do for work? It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like if you can't do the spiritual principles, it doesn't matter what you're doing for work. And you're probably not going to get some sort of um sustainable inner, I don't know what the word is, sort of resource or connection from those goals. So you need to like intertwine that. So that I, for a while, just to quickly reflect on what you said, um, I kept confusing like earthly matters and like our what I thought I needed to achieve in my life with God's will. And I
Mhm.
love that you just said that it's actually more based on like live how you're living, how are you treating yourself, how are you treating other people. That I don't know. It's just I think that's where it's at more than any of that other stuff.
Yeah, like principled action versus intentional action. You
And I
know,
think you said the
like
most important thing.
goal related, principled versus goal related.
Correct. And again, I don't think any higher power would ever want us to not achieve goals or like do great in all sorts of areas of our
Mm,
life. But if you have, again, sort of like the spirit that's sleeping in the background, if you have it in the wrong order, you'll probably have to
mm,
take a look at it again. But you mentioned that they talk about it all the time. It's the main thing. It's the manifestation of self. So I like the question about motives because you mentioned just that 1 hour in that reprieve, taking a look at someone else and spending time in someone else's life takes you an hour out of self.
yeah, exactly.
Very cool. Very cool.
And so now that question back to you.
Okay. So
Hmm.
I would answer that the biggest change, and again, we can go quickly tap back onto that step four, was that when I started to realize how much fear I had, it's still hard to say that at times, because I was hoping to give off the impression that I wasn't full of fear, but the self consciousness, and for me, the greatest change in my motives is that the best sentence I was ever said to me was, I no longer require other people's affirmation to feel okay about myself. So I like needed, I don't, it sounds so common and the validation, nothing makes me happier than having a positive interaction with someone. And I'm quite open to getting some like positive feedback. But
Yeah.
before, if I had any sort of abrasion, it would set me spinning. I'm like, well, like what could I have done differently? Like why did blah, 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 blah. And like now I don't get so sticky, like
Mm,
my motives in the sense I know how to move on and I know when to dig in. I think that's what's different now. Like I know when it's time to like I got to dig in and go through those birth pains because that's the only way to get to the other side. And then that wisdom to know the difference. Like I know when to leave things alone now. I might take things, I might battle it for a little while, but eventually I'm like, okay. And so I think that's what's changed the most with me is the ability to move on and to hunker down when need be. And of course there's been a diminishing of self-importance. It doesn't mean that I don't respect myself. It just, man, I was looking for myself everywhere, and now I don't really kind of do that as much, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. So, serenity doesn't mean that we don't experience dramatic events. It gives us the clarity of mind to go through them. No matter what happens, we can remain whole and joyful at our core. Has this been your experience? Please explain in either direction.
That's a really good question too. Amazing. So I'll just quickly get this off my chest because it's easy to forget. So I have a new sponsor because I moved to British Columbia. So another amazing gentleman came into my life. It's amazing, like just how many people that hold the torch that can guide you, no matter where you go, if you're willing. The thing he said to me, because I was like, man, this is getting really tough. I mean, I'm being pushed to my limits here. And he said, the steps are there. Okay, how did he say it? He said, they're there not to prevent you from having bad things happen or challenges happening. They're there to protect you when they do.
Ooh.
And I just thought that was so well said, so true. Like, so they don't prevent, they protect.
Yeah.
However, they probably do prevent because you're now living quite differently. So you're likely not creating as many, challenges for yourself, but you're basically pointing out that we're not guaranteed to not have some pretty tough stuff come down the line. You hear a lot of people say like life keeps coming at you, right? And
Mm.
so okay, so a couple really tough things have happened in my life in the 9 years. There's consistent things that already existed. A lot of stuff has gone away. Like I've been relieved of a lot of stuff, but like new things have come. I can say for certain that there's a completely different. I always use the word I feel protected, and like that's what I just mentioned in that saying. Like I just feel like there's like a little weird orb, and as long as I don't do certain things, like it doesn't mean I'm not feeling things deeply. I might I might genuinely wonder how I'm going to get through this. I might spend a
Hmm.
few weeks in that headspace, but it's so different now. And like I call, I admit, I ask for help. I try to extend a branch to someone else like that, whatever relieves that bondage of self, whether that's admitting, step 11, step 10, seeking guidance, but also like, am I full of fear today? Do I need to talk to somebody? Has there, been something that I need to apologize for so I don't have any extra burden on my mind, following me from one day to the next. So to answer that question, I would say that I just have like a renewed sense of self that's based in a healthy self-esteem. And that seems to just like be invaluable. It doesn't mean that I don't make mistakes. It doesn't mean that I don't still wish I had interacted differently or all these things, but there's just this little line that I try to stay above. And if I go down here, I'm just sinking, and so it's something like that. There's like a renewed sense of self that seems to be able to like get through these things that come down, like I've had a lot of physical challenges and some familial and some personal and friends. And like I have one of my dearest friends in the world, I just found out the other day, has only a little time left with us, and it's absolutely crushing. Somebody I've known since I was 3 years old, and it's like I would have used that, like you mentioned, that could have turned into like a 3 month self-destructive sort of like well justified, like, oh, life is so unfair, you know anyhow, it's just completely different approach to things. I don't know.
I was mourning my parents before they even left, dude, inside my addiction. And
Yeah, I
now
can see
I'm
that.
trying to like cherish the moments that I have left. That if
Yeah.
that's my recommendation to anybody is that, you may have limited time with your friend left, call them as often as you can. You know,
Yep,
like you'll never regret sharing time with somebody. That time is of the essence, and time is of the essence in every relationship, really. You know,
exactly. And everything is temporary. So there's tragedy, but like, so the old me would have only looked at the fact that this person might be leaving. I wouldn't have been able to like sit with like joy in my heart and remember like when we were 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and like the funny stuff we did. Like, I just feel like you're way better at sifting through and finding the stuff that gives things meaning rather than seeing what's missing, you know?
mhm. You know,
So
a good friend of mine in the program, he says the meaning of life is to give life meaning.
yeah, it is.
I love it. But it's one of my favorite sayings that
It's
I've
so
learned
funny
inside the program.
it's so funny because like there's been a half dozen of these so far, and like the old me would have been like whatever, like okay guys, you know, but I just like it, I just love it now, you know, because it's true.
It is true. It is true.
Yeah,
And it's okay to be a seeker of knowledge and evolution, you know, like, and it's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's not like uncool to be thinking about life, you know? Like,
yeah,
you when so that question that I asked you,
yeah,
I I would say that it's like one step forward, two steps back a lot of days, you know, like
that makes sense.
I definitely there was something you said earlier and I really agreed with it. It's like I might not be able to react to everything the way I want to right away,
Yeah,
but at least now inside the program, I have an awareness of what I'm not like, I don't stay in the shit as long. Like
yes,
if I get angry, I'm more likely to turn around to apologize and change my day. Bad
sure,
events don't have to mean bad days. Like I remember a couple of weeks ago, it was like this really hard start to my Saturday, and then kind of a great afternoon, and then I saw someone around supper time, and they're like, "How's your day?" I was like,
yeah,
"What the fuck do I say now?" Like it's like the best, the worst, amazing, shitty, fucking whatever. Like it was
yeah,
everything all at once, and
yeah,
uh, and
it
so
is, yeah,
like I want, I try to remain whole, and
nice.
I'm not sure if it's a constant state of joy, but there's a lot of people in the program who accuse me of excessive happiness. I think I'm happier than most, you know,
Yeah,
and
you've got a great attitude and a wonderful presence. Yeah,
but it's work in progress, always,
it
always for
is,
that.
it is.
And like I said earlier, I feel like my own personal serenity comes in glimmers, and those
Okay,
glimmers, those glimmers are enough to keep me driving forward. They're enough to keep my
that's right,
belief in the program from happening, and they're enough to keep me wanting to be different.
that's right.
So yeah. Okay, do you got another question you want to ask me?
I do, and I think it's a nice one to complement the last one. It's a quick, kind of clear,
Mhm.
like how do you stay present?
Okay.
How do you
Uh,
how do you live in the moment? Like I know live in the moment, but like how do you stay in your day?
so okay, this to me, I know it's going to sound like the opposite,
Okay.
but it's running a consistent program.
Yeah.
Like, first of all, in order for me to at all feel present in the day, I need a certain amount of rest. And it's
Mm.
something that I never believed in while I was doing drugs. I used to say sleep was for pussies. It was like literally, I was like, fuck that, sleep when you die. Like it really was part of
Yeah.
what my brain was. And
I believe
and
you. I believe you.
and I've come to see that with too much caffeine or not enough sleep, I cannot have any serenity in my day.
Yeah.
Like
That makes
like
sense.
too much caffeine is a killer of serenity for me. And like because then I am just like everything's like and I'm not here at all.
Yeah.
But if I'm too tired, I'm like something will happen and I'll just live in the moment of resentment instead of staying in the present moment. I'm finding like I get up and I write a song usually every day or two,
Yeah.
and songwriting really helps me be present. And then I
Nice.
try to exercise after that, and I try to walk my dogs, and being part
Nice.
of being with nature And part of like right now where I am, there's a heated pool. And so it's
Yeah.
really awesome. Dude, I've been swimming like doing laps for half an hour every morning. And I've
Very
had some
nice.
real insightful moments while I'm doing that. And it's like trying to focus on how to do this without injuring my body, like
Yes,
finding which movement is hurting me, which movement isn't, and like listening into my body really pulls
that's
me
cool.
back to presence. um and then I've been I started maybe about 6 or 7 weeks ago just trying to get into more meditation, and
Nice.
involved with that is the consciousness of your breath.
Okay.
And sometimes it's just like closing my eyes and breathing and feeling that breath move in and out can help
Absolutely.
me come back to the moment. And because I was listening to a couple speaker tapes, and one of them really was saying that it's absolutely impossible to have conscious contact with your higher power in the past or the future. Like it
That makes
has to be
sense.
the present moment. So
Yeah,
if you can't pull yourself to the present moment, then you have a disconnection from you and your higher power. Like
that's great.
absolutely. It's like not even a maybe. It's just the way it is.
I think
So
you're
it's like
100%. Yeah,
so, like those are the things. Like I would say that the one single act in my life that I have achieved a moment of complete presence in is music. When I'm
very.
really in the middle of a song and I am working as hard as I can to execute it, there is no brain left over for tomorrow's worries or yesterday's regrets. Like I am right there, just feverishly going. And there's moments
Nice.
where it's like I'm nowhere but there. And
That's amazing.
that to me is the moments of presence that I think, that I read about people seeking, you know?
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. I mean, what an amazing thing to know that truth about the being with self and connecting to the higher power. And then on top of that, like that, knowing the activities that get you there, like the things that you're so blessed to know actually bring you there. Because I mean, I've sat in little groups where there's people that have been at this stuff for like 30 years and like meditation like won't catch me doing that, and you're like, maybe you should try that, like, you know it's like it maybe that's cool. That was awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
And you?
So for me, I would have to say similar for sure. um the greatest gift I achieved, well, one of the things that I was burdened with the most, and I think it's quite common for us and probably people in general, is the mind's ability to take you and slap you around, and you're in a storm, like they talk about, they say the monkey in the cage, or um the restless mind. And so back when I was like basically ill all the time because I was drinking constantly, my mind was very unwell, and it was like constant. And I was trying to find out how to fix myself without an action based, like all I was doing was thinking. I wasn't changing anything. I wasn't, it was all the same thing over and over again, but I was trying to find out how to fix it in my mind, which is, you'll never achieve that. So they say, like, take the action and the mind will follow, and calm down, which I think is also one of the blessings of like all the things we get from doing the steps. So when I did the steps, I was relieved of my bondage of self, which made my mind less chattery, which gave me the ability to become present. And because it was fundamentally based in like who I thought I was, whether it was what I wanted to be or wasn't, or what I had done and wished I hadn't, this constant communication, I could never calm down, so doing that work, relieving myself of like this horrible bondage of like who I thought I was, and then being restored to sanity and living in a way where I could build that healthy self-esteem, allowed me, similar to how I can deal with challenges better, I can be present better because I'm not constantly bombarded by this like endless attempt to solve my problems in my mind, you know? And so
I know
that's,
exactly.
yeah, so that's sort of like been one of the huge pieces to be able to be present. And I too, I do a lot of stuff outside. I can genuinely be present when I'm like out for a hike, or you mentioned walking the dog. I do a ton of that as well. I also enjoy music, and I play a lot of music, and I actually really like meditating. I do. Yeah.
Yeah,
So those are
it
the
was
things.
it was after someone's relapse in the fall, and every time somebody I know relapses, I use it as an opportunity to check my program.
Okay.
I go through and I'm like, where am I weak here? You know? And it came down to realizing that I needed to meditate more. You know,
Yeah.
I've been shying away from this because I'm using music only as it. And even
Okay.
if that is sufficient, I was
Sure.
like, I just think I need to try the other type as well. And
I
so
think
it's
so.
been an interesting journey, and I've learned of some really incredible things just in the few, the few weeks that I've been doing it. So
Nice.
I've got another question for you here. Our
Please.
first step placed us on a path to awareness, connection, and serenity. We received much more than simple abstinence. We have been given an endless supply of principles to guide us as we travel through our lives. How has living by spiritual principles enhanced your life, and how do you ensure you're living by them?
Another really nice question, my friend. Um, so when you admit you're powerless, you're being honest in a way that you could not do before. It's a door that you could not unlock because you wanted to do it a different way, anyway, but this way, right? So when you finally give up they talk of the multitude ways we try to achieve like being to use wisely or to drink responsibly or whatever. So and then you can obviously branch it into any other aspect of life. But I know when I'm living in fear now. So I know when I'm reacting poorly because I'm living in fear. Why am I lashing out? Why do I feel like I need to explain myself? Like, why am I defending myself? And it's like, oh, because I'm probably scared I'm not going to get what I want in my life. And it's so simple, but it's so true, and it's well disguised. And I'm relying on other people to do things, and if they don't, then I'm not going to get my ambitions to the place that I want. And then, have I failed someone else, and like, how could I let this happen? I'll admit on the air, I literally thought that I screwed this up last week. I was like, I did not show up for the podcast. Like, I thoroughly believe that I had lost, like, missed the time. And I was like, I was so upset with myself, man. Like, I literally was like, I got to make an amend right now.
I'm
And
only laughing because I was like, this is awesome, but you didn't miss it.
and I'm like, I gotta tell him, like, I hope he gives me another chance. And it wasn't even the right day, right? And so I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, I told my sponsor, I was like, dude, I've like screwed this up. And he was just like, make your amend, and I'm sure he'll like, and I'm even like seeking guidance on this thing. And then I'm like, oh, it's next week. So anyway, I'm admitting I'm admitting that I'm still very fragile to like mistakes. Like, I really don't like making mistakes like that. Um and So a combination of like, okay, what am I going to do about the mistake if I make it? How, like, how we used to let the whole thing go, like the molehill in the mountain. It's like, it's okay to like make mistakes without tearing yourself into pieces, and like making an appropriate action to try to like ensure that if it has affected someone else, that there's like an understanding that I did not mean to do that, and blah blah. But the other main thing is, so it's taking action when I am convinced that I could have done things differently. And then what I said just before that, it's like I now know when I'm living in fear. And so I can try to do something about that, because I now have the ability to be like, how many times have you done this before? Has it ever ended up being like worth this much concern? And I don't know, you just kind of negotiate with yourself. It's like, I'm just going to have a little moment to like kind of pick through this. And do I really need to be this worked up? You know, kind of. Anyhow, I hope that was a decent explanation, but those two things.
I agree. And, you know, just to piggyback on what you just said there, it's like the ability to not catastrophize a mistake.
Yeah, perfect word. Yeah.
Like I feel like for myself, I'm like, whoa, like I'm blowing this out of proportion. And I just
Yeah.
didn't have the ability to recognize it until I had ruined a day over it.
Yeah,
Or,
exactly. Yeah.
or enabled myself to go and use on it.
Yeah.
So how has living by spiritual principles enhanced my life, and how do I ensure I am living by them? Well, okay, obviously it's changed everything in my life. I get like, how has it enhanced my life? Well, first of all, I'm not using. Second of
Yes.
all, I literally have gained tools to perpetually change my life on a beautiful path of evolution that I want to be on for the rest of my life. Like
Love it.
I feel lucky enough to have the opportunity to be in the program. I feel lucky enough to not have died without finding it. Like
Oh my God.
when my heart stopped, man, like it could have just gone either way.
Definitely.
I've started to say now that at the moment my heart stopped, it started beating again in a different direction.
That's
You
awesome.
know,
Yeah.
And, like it has brought me honesty. It's brought me integrity. It's brought me the chance to have acceptance for others in my life for the first time. Because doing my step work, what I realized was that like all my shit was based with expectations.
Big
Like
time.
if I was fucking nice to you, I expected nice back at a certain point. And
No doubt.
I expected at least one quarter nice back. Like
Yeah.
like I look at it and I'm like, my nice ratio was about one quarter. Like I didn't expect you to be as nice or as generous as me. But when I really needed something, I expected to be able to lay a card and be like, Brian, you owe me nice.
Yeah, no doubt.
And
That's very good insight. Yeah.
now, like now how do I ensure I'm living by them? I'm doing like little moral inventories. And when I'm having conflict in my life, you know,
Yeah.
I'm working it out. I went to my sponsor with a problem the other week and it was great. He was just like, okay, hey, let's step for this. He's like, we wrote out my problem verbally and
Yeah.
we're like, oh, okay. And after that, I'm like, I'm not carrying that shit anymore. And that
Isn't that
is what,
something?
and that's what the fucking tools let us do. The tools let us let shit go. And it's like, that's not my monkey. That's not my circus. That's a people, person, place, or thing I can't control. And I have done the
Definitely.
right thing. I've done the right thing in that situation. So I don't have to carry that. And,
Yeah.
like I now have a life's purpose from these principles. And that life's purpose is to learn about acceptance. That is my life's
Amazing.
purpose right now. And that's
Oh,
and then to carry this message out there. That's why I'm doing this podcast. I want people to see that there is happy, fun, amazing recovery, and that
yeah.
and
Like
that it
your
doesn't have
heart
to
can
be
be full.
boring. Yeah, it doesn't have to be boring, sad, and miserable like a fucking Loudermilk show or something like that. Like,
No.
like
And
there's so many misrepresentations of people inside the program, and none of them are good.
I could totally understand that. Yeah. I was gonna just add, what was it that it came through? Oh yeah, I was just gonna add that little because of what you were describing there. It seems like you two have like kind of gotten a lot better at like untangling yourself from others too. Just that little. That's another thing with the principles and how do I know I'm living in them. Like I'm much better at differentiating between like me and you. Like I still get a little taken back when people project stuff onto me, whether it's a family
Mhm.
member or whatever. I'm like, whoa. And then it's like, you don't want to suggest that you're like, oh, I have the solution and look at how I'm living and look at how you're living still. But like the simple fact is, like, there's a lot of people that are still living out of that sick part of their soul. And like, so when you go like, oh, this isn't personal, they don't know better. It's like they don't know better. And what a gift to be able to untangle that a little sooner than I used to.
Absolutely. And,
So that,
and what a gift for you to maybe be able to have compassion towards them.
and yeah, yeah, perfect.
That's a
So yeah,
principle in your life, enhancing it right there. Prime
exactly.
example.
Yeah.
Do you have another question for me?
Yeah, I do. So it's interesting. It could come back to expectations. Um, so where is it? So do you have a renewed perspective on what like your fellows, like what others are capable of now in a positive way? Like it goes both ways, but you know, like oh,
Mm.
I feel like I was quite take like a renewed sense of like it's a lot of great people that are willing to help out there, you know?
And so, okay. Um, yes, I find that it's hard sometimes to not be judgy. It's
Yeah.
hard sometimes, and that's still something I struggle with. That's part of my journey in acceptance
Mm-hmm.
is compassion and tolerance for others of where they're at, right? But
Yes.
I've met some real magical people inside this program,
Mm-hmm.
and and from their shares and their stories, I really see that that there's hope for growth inside
Well
me,
said.
and that that wasn't there before. I
Yeah,
had a
exactly.
pretty I had a pretty jaded view. I had a
I
pretty
believe you.
jaded view. And if going to like what you were saying about expectations, it's like, man, if the world wasn't as I expected, it was a catastrophe that was
Yeah.
just worthy of using. Like
Yeah.
that was pretty much it. What about you on that one?
Yeah. So for me, I think like it came back to that first little chunk of time right around that 3 month mark. I couldn't believe that somebody was willing to spend several weeks, or sorry, weeks, several hours of their week with me, no transaction other than having found a solution and wanting me to find it. That I had not seen that. Like I had not been
Mhm.
around that. I have competitive siblings, I have competitive friends, I have, employers that want to pay me the least amount possible. Like I had basically been in a world where it seemed like there was sort of, there wasn't people weren't doing that sort of stuff. And it wasn't
Yeah.
a pessimistic perspective. It was an experiential reality for me. And so to have someone that had no idea who I was so lucky. So I went into my first meeting pouring sweat, terrified. And this gal came up to me and she said, I know you're new. And she said, I think my husband can help you. And that's how I talked about these little things
Nice.
falling into place. So she introduced me to her husband at a Starbucks in Toronto, and he said, "Do you want what I have?" And I was like, "I have no idea what you're talking about, but I just can't do this anymore. Like, I know I need to do something with this." Anyway, that 3 month mark, when I realized that this person, it restored my perspective on people. Period. And that was a
Hmm.
huge thing because I don't. It was just like really nice to know that this whole thing functions on just giving something back, having gotten something you never thought you'd find, and then also, all constantly revisiting it to replenish this resource. It's a much more honest. I like that the whole thing's based in spiritual principles. I just like so for me, a combination of knowing that if I found a solution to this like horrific thing in my life, there's solutions for these things in other people's lives. And I was just really grateful to know that people were willing to actually help. And that's sort of what inspired that question. Cause I remember how happy I was to have a different perspective on like generally what people are capable of. So I just thought I'd ask if you had a similar kind of experience with that.
So my relationships at the end of my addiction were really decayed. You know, like my
Mhm.
family relationships from lying and deceiving and using, they've gone so far downhill in my mind, you know. I wasn't all round a bad person, but I was doing bad things
Of
for a
course,
long
of course.
time. But my friend relationships, you know, like, man, there's very few of them that have survived. Like, you
Agreed.
know, first of all, almost all of them are addicts of some sort or another, and that's not a judgment. That's an
No,
assessment. Um,
that's fine.
and second of all, I feel like it was like real transactional, like, and not necessarily with substance. Like me and a lot of my friends were quite successful, so it wasn't like I necessarily needed something from you. I could always afford my own, right?
I get
But
that. Yeah.
what it was, this was the transaction that was occurring, was that you can totally fuck up sometimes, and then I get a pass when I fuck up sometimes.
Okay.
You know, like it was
That's
like
interesting.
and I feel like a lot of alcoholics really have that relationship with their friends. Like we do some really fucking horrible things, and you know, I always say that your friends and lovers are the people whose flaws you accept.
Oh, you
You
bet.
know,
And you
and
have
so
to some degree.
well, or you're gonna sit by yourself somewhere because nobody's fucking perfect.
Well
Like,
said. So that's an amazing thing. And also, prior to this in the conversation, I mentioned that maybe I stayed a little longer than I should have, or
mm,
maybe I said yes to some shifts that I didn't actually need or want. Whatever, right? It's like all learning
mm,
about. But so it's that fine tuning, and like that unrealistic expectation of that of like, yeah, feeling blissful, but also then too, like, that dynamic in relationship. You said it earlier, about maybe I'll lose all my friends. Like when I finally decided, like, no matter what, I know I have to do something about this. I had that fear I'm gonna lose my friends, and like I accepted in my heart, like, I may have to lose everyone, and which was not even close to the truth of what happened, but I had to face that fear, like, in order to move forward,
mm.
because it's like it
Entire.
felt like that was what was going to happen,
There's
and it
two
does
of
in
my
some degree.
friends. There's two of my friends that I'm still in contact with from before,
Yeah.
and it's not always necessarily easy. Like I'm telling you right now, for me, partying is not a spectator sport.
No.
And you know, and watching people decay from the sideline, like that's a hard one. Not to be like, hey man, I see you're really hurting yourself. You know, like
Yeah.
it's like I would rather just withdraw temporarily. You
And I
know,
think that
like
that's wisdom, that's not
yeah, yeah,
avoidance.
like yeah. Okay, so I got a question here. Prayer helps us let go of our fear and distrust and live in faith. We don't have to understand it for it to work. We open a
Okay.
door to faith deep within us that allows us to meet adversity with serenity. Do you pray? How do you pray? And is it a daily part of your life?
Man, you got some lovely questions, seriously.
I'm a good question comer upper with her. That's
You
my
are.
new.
I feel like mine are, I need to
I know I love
beef these
yours.
things up. Okay. Um So I'm really lucky. I had a few spiritual experiences prior to even sobriety where, like, I sort of got a little nudge, like there's something here and it's powerful and it loves you. And um I had some pretty unhealthy experiences with sort of like one of my parents' kind of ways of navigating religion. So I had, like a lot of other people, like not the greatest experiences like with that beforehand, but I was lucky to have a couple personal experiences that sort of, it was like a little bit of a, there's something here if you want to look and try to see it. And I do pray. I wish I prayed more. I I do live with a faith that I didn't think existed before. Between you and me, I think it's time in my life that I'm just completely honest. Like I love God. I, whatever that is, the intelligence that gave me the opportunity to even have a look at this stuff. Like, you know, I cannot take credit for any of this. So whatever that beautiful thing is, I trust it. I believe in it. I like to hand over things that I care about, like my loved ones. I trust them in its hands. I trust me in its hands. I yeah, I don't want to be too dramatic, but like I don't think I'd be here, man, if I didn't have those experiences. Like I just
Mhm.
and I know that it comes in, like you said, there's like pockets. You know, we get like little tastes of it. And in the meantime, it's like you're so I look at it like this. A good parent wants they watch, they see what their kid's going to do. Like they offer the guidance, it's always there, but they want you to learn how to walk. You know, this thing wants us to learn how to walk. You know, a good parent
Mhm.
lets you make mistakes and learn and then learn how to walk. And you could that's just a obvious symbol for anything. So
I
I
love
look
that
at it like,
analogy.
yeah, so while I'm crawling and I'm trudging, like it's there. It's not it's the sun is behind the clouds, but it's there and it wants me to learn how to walk. And so I pray for see, I just want to feel like protected and loved, like whatever that looks like, you know? And and if I feel like that's there, it really helps me move through the like really discomfort and like the like for this is so ridiculous, but like I was so scared to make coffee at a meeting. I was like, oh man, like I gotta make coffee and like what if I screw it up? And it's like so crazy to be like, and the best part is I went to like a meeting that I didn't attend regularly, so I didn't know anybody. And they're like, "Do you mind helping make the coffee?" And I'm like, "No problem." And then I make the coffee. I make the coffee, and this lady takes a sip, and she's like, "Oh my god!" She's like, "Who made the coffee?" And I was like, "Oh my god!" Like my fear was coming true. You know, like she said it was like she's like it's too strong or whatever. And I honestly just like burst out laughing because like I'm living my fear of the coffee. It's happening. It's it's like and everybody survived. I think no one else said anything, so maybe she I don't know, but like, you know, funny stuff like that, you know. It's like it's I've taken on bigger challenges than coffee making, thank God, but I just think that's a really good example of like
Step by step.
I would have avoided that in the past, brother. Like I would have been like, oh,
Hmm.
like I got to go to the bathroom or something, you know?
You know, it's funny because I've often said the anticipatory anxiety of an event is way worse than the actual event.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
perfectly said. Yeah.
like you know, and if it's something we got way too much time and caffeine to think about on the way, ooh, I
Yep.
can blow that shit right out of proportion.
Oh, definitely. That's awesome. Yeah. So, yeah, that's a little bit of that.
And so, do you have another question for me?
Yes. This is an interesting one because you mentioned like you and your friends, you were successful and you always had what you needed, like you had achieved a certain level of success, but in a different way. Do you now believe that you can do so much more than you may have previously thought? Like, do you know or do you believe you can do more than you previously thought in your life with this newfound, whether it's time or health or inspiration?
So, I believe that I can have a more profound positive effect upon humanity.
Okay.
And I'm seeing that even inside just sponsoring and doing
Yeah.
this podcast, you know, like there's been some people who aren't even addicts who have come and said, "Hey, you know, this podcast has been really helping me just in life."
Amazing. I believe that.
You
Yeah.
know, like I don't think the 12 steps need only be for addicts. And
Very
so
well.
There's a shift in the paradigm of what I call success, and there's a shift in what I want to do in life.
Yeah.
In the ideal world, I would be able to sit here and talk to you all day and help people the rest of the day and play music that other last quarter, you know?
Yeah, that sounds lovely, and I totally understand.
Yep.
Yeah.
But, as far as it goes in the kind of dog eat dog world of business,
Yes.
I feel that I will have a lower level of financial success, but a greater level of emotional success inside it.
Beautiful.
I'm not allowing other people to be hurtful towards me
Sure.
in a way that they used to inside my business, and
Okay.
but I'm also delivering a much higher level of service because I'm really focused on that,
And you're healthy.
and I'm healthy. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
And what
amazing. And
about
so I was kind of hoping, yeah, I was kind of hoping that that would be somewhat of how you would navigate that question. And it's so funny because they all kind of flow into each other because that came back. That's also really motive. Like, sorry, it's part of that other question that was like, have your motives changed? And so,
Absolutely, they've changed. Yeah.
so I'll be honest with you. So I mentioned that I was in a career where I was working in marine construction. I was doing like hard hat surface supply diving, and I was sort of like I I lived many years where I was sort of like I think it was a false sense of security, but like a little fearless and like bring it on, and like that world was pretty rough. Like the people involved, it was a lot of ego. Um, every dude was trying to be like the man, and um, I realized that when I was training for it and doing it before I got sober, I kind of fit in. But when I changed and kind of cleaned some things up a bit, like I found it actually quite abrasive to be in that atmosphere. Um, the work itself, not at all. Like I still had a definite like nice connection with the work itself, but just like again, just like the energy that was around me all day long, I was like, man, I don't like being around this energy. And
Hmm.
so so that's a good example of like attaining a career and or like a level of pride in your work that like can't be um what's the word, like I felt happy about that, but I knew very shortly that like I was changing as a person. So I started thinking like it seems to be pretty common for us to want to like do stuff like this after we find the solution. So I guess to just get back on track with like, do you believe you can do more than you thought before? For the first time in my life, even though I had that job, which sort of was like a nice achievement, for the first time ever, I was like, wow, like I might be able to do more than I had ever thought. Like I genuinely had a very low opinion of myself. It was cultivated
Hmm.
through like decades of like allowing other people to like keep me questioning myself. Like it wasn't a conscious thing. It's just part of being alive. But I had a lot of people that I looked up to that looked kind of wanted. It seemed like in my mind that they weren't necessarily like rooting for me to do that well. Maybe it was certain friends and stuff, but I genuinely, for the first time in my life, was like, wow, I might be able to do more than I ever imagined. Like, and nothing crazy, because it always comes back to the motive. Like, I don't want to necessarily like it, the goals change. I'm not saying this very clearly, but essentially, I believed in myself in a way that I never had before, and it was like so nice to know. And it also came back to that like one day at a time thing. It's like it's so easy to overwhelm yourself, and it's like if I chip away at things, like who knows what's possible. So that's sort of where that question came from. It's like I remember early on, I sort of when I put these questions together, reflecting on our chat today, I was thinking about like some of the big ticket items that came through. And that was one of the things. And I wanted to share that and ask you if you'd had similar experiences. It's like, all of a sudden I was like, there's things that are available to me now that were not available to me before, you know?
I never pictured like I'd always said people had said to me, you know, oh, you should start a music podcast or whatever. And, but I never did because I just didn't have enough organization in my brain, or maybe, you know,
Sure.
like just not enough confidence, like you were saying. But once I started doing this right here, I'm supposed to come up with good questions for people.
Yeah.
I am. Like I feel like this is part of who I am right now in a big way. And like, you know, and
I'm
even
happy to hear
sharing
that.
with you today, like I feel like you have a real propensity for it. Like I feel like I want to do a pile of episodes with you after today because I feel that we've always had a great dialogue. I wasn't sure
We
how it
have,
would come across on the camera because,
yeah,
well, like oddly enough, although it's just you and me talking right now,
yeah,
some people
yeah,
get nervous, right? You know,
sure.
and sometimes it takes a couple episodes even for them to chill out inside of it. And
I could see
so
that.
I never saw myself as doing this, and yet now it feels like I can't picture not doing it.
I'll be frank, I've never done this before, and it's been like a great experience so far. And I didn't know what to expect. But what I can tell you is that I'm very pleased and what's the word I'm looking for? You're doing a great job.
Nice, thank
Yeah,
you.
it's really good, man.
I
It's
feel like
been
it's the process of it not being an interview and it being a conversation,
I like
and
it.
the process of both of us coming with questions. I think
Very well
it
done.
it's a really good energy exchange.
Yes, and I think it's a perfect way to it ties things together, and it also um, it inevitably is going to bring up things that otherwise may not have come up.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah,
It's like by you being able to ask me questions, it puts me in a vulnerable state too, which then opens up your vulnerability.
I think you're right. Yeah.
You know, do you have more questions?
So I have one more.
Okay, that'll be great. I'm out of questions, so we can go through this one and then we'll high five and love out. Boom, boom. Yeah.
Beautiful. So this is a nice question. What parts of your life do you value differently now?
Okay. Well, okay. First of all, I um I value acting with principles differently
Yeah.
because I don't think that I had them before. And if I did,
Okay.
I wasn't like my filter was so jaded that I wasn't seeing it clearly.
Yeah.
Um, uh, I think I have a different value on time. You know,
Ooh.
when you think your time's up, everything afterwards is a gift. And
Yeah.
so like I really try not to waste this precious commodity of my life right now. You know, people are like, "Oh, you
Very well
do a
said.
lot. You do a lot." And I'm like, "Because I got a lot that I want to do before I'm done." And
That's
I
awesome.
know I've been to the edge and I don't see it as infinite anymore, you know? And I think, you know, I really like my tattoo says I'm grateful for the privilege to help and serve. I got this 4 years before I entered the program.
Did you?
So I actually believed in service beforehand. But what it is now is that I'm really trying to change relationships with
Yes.
family that I fucked up on for a lot of years.
How cool is that?
Yeah.
You know, that's
And what about
beautiful.
you?
Very similar. That all comes back to like, they all tie in. It's like I now believe that I hopefully can do things that maybe I hadn't even thought about. It's again, it's not lofty goals. It's just like possibilities that didn't occur. It was so like this, and
Mhm.
um so my relationship with myself is thank God. So, you know, I value my life differently. Like I think part of the reason I was such a mess is because I thought life was supposed to be all these things and it actually is. But you can't get there the way that I was taught you get there. Nobody showed me the way, you know? And
No.
and and so now I realize, like, oh no, like you definitely can get there, and those things do come with rewards. But it came, like, again, the good father, the good parent, the good mother. You don't raise children that are cocky, insecure, and let them go out and run the world. Like, that, thank God for humility, because I didn't mean to be, but at like 17, 18, I was a fairly sarcastic, you could call potentially arrogant young man. And it wasn't like I had the head in the butt. I just like didn't know better. And I was like living out of a place of ego and insecurity. And those two things are pretty powerful, you know? So, what do I value differently? Most definitely friends and family. I value things that come into my life that I know would not have been there otherwise. You know, like I just left British Columbia after a decade, and I didn't even really realize till I was leaving some of the beautiful relationships I had cultivated. And it wasn't that I didn't appreciate them. It was, of course, I appreciated them. But when someone expresses like, hey, like you've actually been a wonderful part of my life, you're like, well, geez, like not that many people said that stuff to me before, you know? And so I value that. It'd be easy to overlook because it's like, well, I'm over here now, and like it was nice, but you know, it makes you want to keep investing in those things. And same thing, like I value the opportunity to help someone if they ask me. You know, like imagine me like, oh God, I got to go meet this guy and read this book with him. It's like, no, man, like we're gonna go read this book, you know?
Yeah.
It's just so it goes from like strenuous to like strength building, and those are the things that have changed, and I value that stuff. I i love being a brother. Like my relationship with my sisters is like so important to me. I've come a long way with my relationship with my dad. There's a much deeper level of respect on both ends. Like I'll say this, I wanted the world to change and then I'll change. No, it's the other way around, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to say that I value your presence in my life right from the
Me
very
too.
start, man. You know, we had an instant connection, and I'm glad that we've fostered it and continued it into this format, because I think
Pretty
that
amazing.
some of our conversations are listen worthy. You know.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I want to
Well,
compliment you, my friend, because I was blessed to see, you know, a, a transition in your life. I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I think that you're um, doing this in a just an amazing way. I'm really grateful to have had the chance to speak with you, and like I think we both realized this is like these conversation pieces are very um, significant in my opinion. You know, I hope that anyone who's looking for a solution can have an opportunity to be able to talk about this stuff the way we have today.
you know, and to anybody who doesn't know, I didn't actually precurse this, and I'm not sure if it was said earlier, but Brian was one of the support workers at the treatment center I went to. So Brian kind of saw me early in my entry to the program, and you know, we just kind of maintained our conversations and friendships every time we saw each other. And then Brian
Yeah.
recently moved away from Kelowna, so we weren't going to physically see each other anymore, and I wanted to make sure that we were staying in contact. So I asked him for his contact as he was leaving, and then asked him to be on this show because I know from our conversations that him and I could talk a good recovery.
Beautiful. Yeah, you're a
Yeah,
great guy, man. I bless your heart, man.
I love you. Okay, so
Love you too.
everybody out there, tune in next time for more recovery fun. Bye bye, everybody. Catch you
Bye,
later.
everybody.
I love
Thanks a lot.
you. Please help
Love you,
us
brother.
help others. If you like what you've seen here today, please subscribe and share this podcast and help us get to 100 followers. We're looking for interaction with our audience. So please email recoveryfreedomrising@gmail.com or contact Milan South Okanagan Starcic on Facebook with questions, topic suggestions, or just comments. We'd love to hear from you.